Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Judaism and Recovery, God of Our Understanding, part 18. And we are chapter 15, God and the Codependent. Last week, we talked about the disease of codependency, which is a spiritual problem where instead of focusing on my mission from God in the world, I am trying to do someone else's mission, God in the world, someone else's mission from God in the world, which means that I was given the God mission to change and improve myself, and other people in my life were given a mission from God to change themselves, and when I try to change them, I'm doing two things wrong. First of all, I'm not doing my mission of changing myself. And second of all, I'm taking away their opportunity of changing themselves by meddling and mixing in to their business. So today, we're going to talk a little more about how our relationship with God and the nature of our relationship influence the way we interact with others and try to saving others. And it will also give us guidelines when we do want to help others, how to do that within our mission in the world rather than hijacking someone else's mission. Because it's obvious that although God gave each one of us a mission to change ourselves, to improve ourselves, it doesn't mean that we need to be secluded and separated from our fellows, and it definitely doesn't mean that we should shut our eyes when a fellow person is suffering and refuse to help them because it's none of my business. But there's a healthy way to do our mission in the world to help another person who is suffering, and we will bring that up also in our discussion. So we're reading on page 131. Just as recovery from any addiction, recovery from codependence is based on forming a dynamic relationship with God. You see, in a very real way, the codependent is committing emotional idolatry. That is, feeling that someone or something has God-like control over reality. The codependent alternately attributes superhuman powers to his or her own self and to the addict. The addict is so destructive, he's going to do something really bad that wasn't supposed to happen in the world, that's giving the addict superhuman capacity, and then I must save the world from him, which is giving myself superhuman capacities. The spiritual basis for recovery for codependency is thus to let go of the maddening pursuit of inhuman perfection and to embrace human imperfection. Which means humans are not supposed to do everything exactly the right way. So neither that person, the addict, will ever be perfect, nor will I. God is perfect. The rest of us, addicts, codependents, everyone else, are all just doing the very best we can with what we have. God consciousness is the foundation of a new life and a new perspective of reality. For as long as one is devoted to an imaginary vision of perfection, it is impossible to live contentedly in the real world. Because nothing turns out to be perfect. So, if I have an expectation of perfection from myself, or an expectation of perfection from others, I will be disappointed again and again and again. So I will live a miserable life. One must instead to learn to trust in the only true perfection and all-powerful God who is always perfectly in control. We may not like reality, that's okay, we're entitled to our opinion, but the fact is that everything is always the way it needs to be, at least for right now, which on page 417 of the 4th edition tells us that nothing happens by mistake. So if it happens, that's the way it's supposed to be. It doesn't mean that's the way it's supposed to stay forever. It just means for right now, it's part of the plan. And part of the plan is that some humans will make some changes, and the situation might change. But it's not wrong the way it is right now. It is right the way it is right now, and there's going to be another right way. It should be sometime in the future. We're not God, we cannot be, we don't need to be. We cannot control what other people do, and what other people do should not control us. So, to summarize the principles of not to be codependent, the author chooses a popular Jewish song. Don't walk in front of me, I may not follow. Don't walk behind me, I may not lead. Walk beside me and be my friend. Together we'll walk in the ways of God. Okay? So how does that apply to recovery from codependence? Don't walk in front of me, I may not follow, means that I cannot define my life by your decisions. I, the codependent, cannot define my life by the decisions of the addict. I will not choose to put my happiness in your hands. I will not spy on you, monitor you, or try to control your behavior. Neither will I chase you nor cling to you. I am not waiting for you to look over your shoulder to make sure I'm still here. I have to walk my own path. So don't think you're walking in front of me and leading me. Don't walk behind me. I cannot take responsibility for your happiness, your security, or your well-being. I'm not going to set the tone of this relationship. I'm just hewing my own path. And you are free to do as you please. Don't expect me to have things figured out because I'm often wrong. Do not rely on me to be able to make things right because I didn't have that kind of power. So it's a whole new set for a relationship. And we will see in a couple seconds how this is not. It sounds like each for their own, you know? So is this really a relationship? And we sometimes talk about spouses or parents and children. Is that really a relationship? I'm not responsible for you, you're not responsible for me, you do your thing, I'm not going to be affected by it, I do my thing, you don't be affected by me. So it doesn't sound right to most of us, but in the right context we'll understand how it's really the only way to have a healthy relationship with another person. We're going to add a component to the relationship. What's the component? God. If you want to be my equal and join me as I seek the God of my understanding, I am open and available for this. I am not in charge, and neither are you. We're both on the journey with God as both the way and the destination. Someone asked me this week, says, I want to get engaged. Any spiritual perspective? And this person who put a lot of thought in there. And I asked him, well, if he sees this person that he wants to marry as a partner, obviously a partner, yeah. What about a spiritual partner? What does it mean, a spiritual partner? A spiritual partner means that we both want to have a relationship with God, first and foremost, and then we're using our relationship, our partnership, to join forces to achieve that relationship with God. Our goal is to achieve a spiritual goal. We're having a relationship with God, and we do it together. When we do it together, then our relationship is not based on either of our ego, but on both of our selflessness. Someone asked me, so Rabbi, I'm new recovery and I heard you're not supposed to get into any new relationships for 1 year. Is that written in stone, the 1 year thing? I says, first of all, you're supposed to get in a relationship with God. And the 1 year really is not a time because it's a time. It has to do with the quality of relationship with God. If you have the first relationship, your first love is God. Once you have established that, and you want to bring other human beings in that relationship, that's cool. But unless you have established a healthy relationship with God, you have no business, or it's not right, to bring in another person in before you've established that. So let's go back. When two people try to be in a relationship, there are two main issues that sometimes come up. One is that our personalities clash, and therefore we end up being in a battle all the time, either a battle of ideas, a battle of emotions, or whatever it is, because both of our personalities cannot get along with each other. Both of our personalities are taking so much space that there's no room for each other, so keep on pushing each other. Who could take more room than the other person? And I'm not necessarily talking here about romantic relationship, but it applies a lot in romantic relationships. And in parents-teenager relationships sometimes. And then there's another form of problems in a relationship, which is when one person totally takes over, and the other person in the relationship is engulfed and swallowed in the personality of the stronger person in the relationship. So there's one dominant person in the relationship, and then there's the other person who just is totally lost in it. So one person has their ego in full-blown proportion, and the other person has no existence at all. At all. His whole existence exists only within the existence of the bigger fish. Neither of those relationships work because in both of these relationships there is the poison called ego. And if only one person has the ego and the other person doesn't, they swallow them. If both have the ego, then they just fight the whole time. And peace, making peace, does not mean that one ego wins. That can't be peace. That means destruction of one person and the multiplication of the other person. One person becomes bigger, the other guy becomes smaller. What's peace? There's a famous Jewish song, Oseh Shalom Bimromav, which I won't. Oseh Shalom Bimromav. It says that God makes peace in heavens. Why does God need to make peace in heaven? Because there's two forces in heaven. There's the force of fire, and there's the force of water. There's the force of the angel of love and the angel of discipline. And fire puts out water, and water puts out fire. And God makes peace in heavens, Oseh Shalom Bimromav. The word in Hebrew for heavens is also Shamayim, heaven, which is a composition of two words, Esh and Mayim, fire and water, which means that the heavens are a composite of fire and water. How is it possible? How could the ego of fire and the ego of water survive together without destroying each other? It is because we took their ego out. And when the ego is out of the equation, and instead of the ego, there is the presence of God, then there is peace between anything. So by His presence, God sucks the ego out of the fire and out of the water and allows for them to be with each other, each on their own, without annulling each other. That power of peace, oseh shalom bimromav, he who makes peace in them, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, he brings peace upon us too. When we allow him. The fire and the water don't have a choice up there in heaven, but we are stomping our foot and we say, no! We don't want to let go. We don't want to let go of our ego. We don't want to let God. We don't want to. So what happens? Our egos exist and don't allow for real relationships to happen with other people. When can a real relationship happen? When I replace my ego with the presence of God. And my partner replaces their ego with the presence of God. Then it is that I can have a relationship with that person on a true equal footing. Both of us exist, and neither of us are contradiction to the other person. Neither of us are overpowering the other person, and both of us can accept the existence of the other. So what is the key to a relationship with another human being? A relationship with God. Alright, let's see if we can put this over here. To sum up what you said, a codependent relationship may be described as one where two people try to use each other to connect to themselves and fail, whereas a healthy relationship is where two people connect to God through each other and succeed. And on page 133, in the third paragraph, in recovery language, if I am relying on my own power to make life as I think it ought to be, then I must control you. If on the other hand, I am relying on God's power and putting myself in His gear, then I have room for you to be as you are. There can be intimacy instead of smothering. Vulnerability instead of overpowering. All this is possible, though, only when we are mindful of God. So when I bring God in the equation, the great equalizer, the one that takes out my ego, then I have the real possibility of connecting with another human being. And this is what I told this person. I says, you marry, your marriage is part of your spiritual growth. And as such, it could exist and succeed only when your marriage is consciously part of your spiritual program, which is your marriage is based on selflessness. If your marriage is based on selfishness, it's not going to go anywhere. If your marriage is based on selflessness, and your partner is also willing to be selfless, then we have a spiritual marriage. Page 134, on top of the page. There's an amazing story in the book of Genesis about the reunion between Joseph and his brothers. And what happens is, it says that Joseph, when he meets his beloved baby brother Benjamin for the first time in many years, the verse says, he, Joseph, fell on his brother Benjamin's neck and cried, and Benjamin cried on his neck. Benjamin cried on the neck of Joseph. Joseph cried on the neck of Benjamin. Why were they crying? Well, besides the obvious interpretation, tradition sees a deeper significance. They're weeping. Joseph mourned prophetically over the holy temple in Jerusalem, which will one day be built in the land apportioned to the tribe of Benjamin. Benjamin cried over the sanctuary of Shiloh, which he foresaw would stand in territory apportioned to the tribe of Joseph. Since both holy houses were destined to be destroyed, each brother wept for the other's loss. So Benjamin wept for Joseph's loss, and Joseph wept for Benjamin's loss. Now, if both of them were prophets, we're going to assume that they knew about their own loss also. Why weren't they crying about their own loss? You know. How do we know they were not crying about their own loss? Now, the Torah says he cried on his neck and he cried on his neck. So each one cried on the loss of the other person. So Chassidus says, it's very simple. Why do I cry? Cry, we can't change the world through crying. Crying is not an action item to change something or to fix something. It is more a sign of compassion and sadness for an event that is happening. It's part of the mourning, we cry, etc. So really, when are tears appropriate? When I can't do anything about it. If I can do something about it, why are you crying? Stand up and go do something about it. So crying is appropriate when we mourn someone who passed away. Which means that I can't bring him back. So that's appropriate to cry. It's appropriate to show my emotions, to show my pain. I can also feel sad for another person if I share their pain. When they're in pain, I'm in pain. So I can cry on someone else's pain. But when there's an action item attached to it, then crying doesn't make spiritual sense. So the Torah says, you know when you should cry? On someone else's problems. Why? Because you can't fix them. If you were able to fix their problems, you shouldn't be crying on their problems. Your own problems you could fix, right? That's why you don't cry on your own problems. Go fix them. That's the lesson the Torah says from this story. We have a responsibility to fix what is ours. For others, we can't fix it. So the first thing that we do is show compassion. The other thing, we're going to go on the bottom of page 135. If the codependent's problem is obsession with control, then the solution is to learn how to give up control. Specifically to release the addict to the loving, all-capable care of a higher power, and to generally accept God's omnipotent control over all aspects of life. However, one of the greatest obstacles to making this decision is that a codependent may actually feel that controlling others is a moral obligation. Which it is. I mean, controlling others is not a moral obligation, but helping others is definitely a moral obligation. So where do I draw the line? How can I possibly not help another person? Ignore their misery. It's lonely and exhausting playing constant game of a half. Caught you, but that's the price for attaining the moral high ground, right? There's a famous expression that you hear a lot in recovery. Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Part of recovering and trusting in God is to allow God to deal with the sinners. Quote unquote, obviously. I don't think it's any coincidence that the most God-conscious people I know are also the most tolerant. Volunteering to be a member of the morality police is usually a sign of spiritual sickness. The author goes on to talk about a story in the Torah of Pinchas the Zealot. There was a story where the Jewish people were caught in a group together. As a group, they all became immoral in certain actions that had to do with the daughters of Moab. And one of the Jewish leaders at the time was encouraging the Jewish people to sin with the daughters of Moab. And at that time, there was a person called Pinchas, which was the grandson of Aaron the high priest. And he, in the spur of the moment, in the heat of his passion, took his sword out and killed that Jewish leader that was inciting the Jewish people for these forbidden relationships. Now, that's not the way it works. That's not the way it works. The Torah has certain laws and certain consequences to those laws. One thing is there's never room for one person to decide that another person deserves the death penalty. That's for sure. Yet, the Torah not only tells us this story, but also tells us that this guy was a great guy. He was given a trophy, a reward for his actions. Does that mean that we need to go around with swords and kill people who we think are disobeying God's law? Anybody who wants to be a zealot, if you actually want to be a zealot, then you're not one. What's a zealot in the Torah? The Torah tells us, yes, there is such a concept as a zealot. Kana'i. But it comes only from one place, and there's only one place where it could come from. The Torah says, you know who Pinchas was? He was the grandchild of Aaron the Cohen. That's a little embarrassing for Aaron that his grandson went ahead and became a zealot. The Torah says, the reason I'm telling you his lineage to Aaron is to tell you something about who Pinchas is and why, if there is a place for zealotry, he was the right person. You see, Aaron had a reputation of being a loving, kind person. When Aaron passed away, the Jewish people mourned him for 30 days, and it says all of the Jewish people. There was not one single human being, one single Jewish person, who did not feel the loss of Aaron on a personal level. Why? Because he was a man of peace. He used to go around and talk to people and try to resolve conflicts between the husband and his wife, between partners, between family members, between friends. That was his life mission. The Torah says, the Kohen, he was a Kohen, the priest, Ish HaChesed, the person of kindness. You see, when I have a nature of being strict and being controlling and being cruel even, then when I act in the name of God, quote unquote, and kill a person, I am just acting out on what I want to do. That's the type of person I am. I'm the man of the sword. When I am a person that gives kindness all day, and I use my sword, then the usage of the sword is out of my love, not out of my natural desires to be a sword swinging person. The Torah says there's no room for zealotry, don't get me wrong. But the one time that it did happen, and it happened for the right reason, it was carried out by a person who was renowned for his kindness, for his compassion, for his love. Going around telling people what to do all day does not usually come from a place of compassion and love. It comes from a place of ego. When a person learns to be selfless and is actually selfless in their own life, then at a time when they tell a person what to do, it is clear to that person that it's coming out of kindness and compassion. So how does the message come across? If I want to help other people, if I want to help other people, if I want truly to influence their lives for the good, if I want to share my newfound spirituality with as many people as possible, and by the way, a lot of the principles of codependency are also in the big book, not only in the chapter to the wives, which is the basis for Al-Anon, but also in the chapter working with others, which tells us how do we achieve working with other people without trying to fix them. Working with others. Read that chapter. Working with others is loving other people unconditionally. Because my ego is gone. Because I'm selfless. Because I have a strong relationship with God. And because of my relationship with God, I'm capable of having a relationship with other people. A true relationship with other people. Where they actually feel that I care for them. And they feel that I love them. You can't fake it. That's unfakeable. Either you're there or you're not. So when you're truly compassionate and loving and kind to people and you're not trying to express your ego, and then you go to a person and point out the things that they can do to help themselves, then it's clear to them that you're not going to them because you're trying to fix them, because they're bad, because your ego wants you to be the savior. It is clear to them that your only motive is their well-being. There's no other way to convey that unless we're egoless. As long as we're going around, toting around our own selves, then the people that we talk to hear our ego right through our words. Pinchas was the representation of kindness. When he used his sword, it was clear to everybody that he wasn't trying to express his desire to kill people or his ego. It was clear that he had in mind the well-being of the Jewish people at the time. So I strongly encourage you to read this chapter, which we kind of summarize here and there. There's on page 138, there's a little prayer from the Al-Anon book, As We Understood, on page 215. I cannot control or change my friends or loved ones, so I release them into your care, for your loving hands to do with as you will. Just keep me loving and free from judging them. If they need changing, God, you'll have to do it. I can't. Just make me willing and ready to be of service to you, to have my shortcomings removed, and to do my best. I help others when I let my ego go, and I'm free from judging, and I'm seeping with love. That's when I help people. All the rest of the time, I have this fantasy of care, of controlling and curing people with reality.